Right now, we're going to welcome our next live guest. We've got Alan Adler in the house today to talk a little bit about what's going on with manufacturers taking new truck orders. And Alan, they've delayed this for so long. They've just kind of held back on taking new orders as much as they can, but that's not quite the case anymore. Can you tell us a little bit about why?
Actually, good morning, guys. It is, in fact, continuing, at least for now. That is this sort of discipline or holdback on accepting orders. These guys, the manufacturers got burned last year. They agreed to take in all the orders that fleets wanted, and they booked these orders earlier in the year in 2021. Then they found that between supply chain problems, starting with semiconductors, and then continuing on to kind of a rotating number of issues with other parts, that they couldn't build them. And so in November, or really October and November last year, we saw something very unusual, which was that the manufacturers started canceling orders, retiming them for 2022, things like that. What's unusual about that is that typically it's the fleets that place a lot of orders enthusiastically and then cancel them when they see that maybe the rates aren't good or the freight demand is slowing. This time it went the other direction and the manufacturers did the canceling. So what they're trying to do, and this is where this sort of self-imposed discipline comes in, is they don't want a repeat of that. So while they're still under pressure in terms of parts and things like that, and commodity prices bouncing all over the lot, they're saying, look, we're going to take just enough orders in that we know we can build. So right now, those numbers are, call it 18,000 units a month, okay, for the industry of Class 8 orders. That number means nothing unless you compare it to, say, 3 years ago in 2019, they took in 50,000 orders in a month. Now, that was a pull ahead where people were buying early and things like that. So it too is an unusual time. What is different and the same is that these guys are going to revert to the behavior of normal times. That is, they're going to start taking more orders as soon as they're confident that they can build them, simply because there's so many things that are at risk. And I can explain what I mean by that.
Yeah, I'd love for you to do that, because my question is this. I get it. Don't cancel the orders if you're not going to build them anyways. And if the industry is disciplined enough so that somebody else doesn't say, hey, you know what, I'll take those, and then put them in their coffer and wait for the chance to be able to build those, whether that comes or not, then you really don't have to worry about those. But there's other worries, aren't there? I mean, if you've got a slowdown in the economy and slowdown in trucking, do you risk those orders just never coming back if you cancel them?
Well, you've got so many things going on. I don't know if we'll fit them all in, but let me try. Basically, when you've got all these orders, piled up, and right now you've got about 10 months in terms of what's called the backlog to build. That is, the backlog is about 10 months. If you ordered a truck today, it would take about 10 months to get it. Okay, and that assumes that there's any build slots left for you to have that truck, which is really increasingly not happening this year. So you're not going to get anything if you put an order in today, Michael. You're not going to get it this year. You're going to get it next year. Yeah. So you've got a pretty good backlog to work through right now. So if you've got 18,000 trucks a month being ordered, the industry can build to about 25,000 trucks a month, according to Kenny Veith at ACT Research. And they can do that for a long time before they need to start cranking up the orders again. But why these orders are important is because these are not just truck makers. These are companies that build engines, and they build transmissions, and they make parts for the aftermarket. All of this is linked. It's a vertical supply chain, if you will. And so it isn't just about the new truck orders. It's about all the things that go with it, and basically the viability of their businesses, right? Let's just pick on PACCAR for a minute. PACCAR has opened new parts operations. They've set two quarterly records in terms of revenue and profits on parts. Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is a lot of their trucks have been on the road, as is everyone's trucks, have been on the road longer than expected because you can't get new trucks. So the longer these trucks are out there, beyond that normal trade cycle of, call it 4 years for argument's sake, if they're out there an extra 6 months, that's 6 months more parts, quite honestly, that they might need, either wear out or repair parts, right? So the parts business becomes very important in this equation, as does, keeping those engine operations running. Everybody buys engines from Cummins, we know that, but they also make their own. Detroit makes them for Daimler, and PACCAR makes their own engines, I think in Mississippi, and of course Volvo and Mack get their engines out of Maryland. So they all make their own, right? And so all of these things are linked, and that's part of the reason why you won't see this discipline of holding down orders last really for too long. The business depends on them being able to build. And as Kenny told me yesterday, he said, nobody ever got rewarded for not selling trucks.
Alan, I'm interested in kind of the specifics of talking about where the pieces of that vertical supply chain go. When you're looking at new orders versus aftermarket parts versus parts for trucks that are needing to be replaced on a regular cycling basis, is there kind of an order of importance where these manufacturers are putting their goods? And does that play into these manufacturers either choosing to hold on to those orders or not? Like, is it more important for people to get aftermarket parts out for existing trucks than it is to get those new parts, those same parts out for the new builds, or vice versa?
Well, you know what? One of the things that these manufacturers learned, Kaylee, during the COVID pandemic was that you really can move things around. Instead of saying, no, these are strictly for aftermarket, if we need a certain part and we need it for production because we've got enough chips, for example, to make this truck, but we need this part, then we're going to pull it out of the parts, the aftermarket area, and we're going to put it into production. Same is true, usually more often going the other direction. If you've got parts that are scheduled in production, but maybe your orders are being held back, then you can slide those parts, given, depending what the part is, you can slide it into the aftermarket. Right now, with the age of the fleet on the road going up, and it's continuing to, we're starting to see a little bit of sliding back now in terms of auction prices and ultimately retail prices for used trucks. But these older trucks that are on the road are going to need more maintenance. They're going to need more parts. And so I would argue, and I don't think anyone would dispute it, that, you're going to bias yourself toward taking care of the aftermarket, right? If you can only make X number of parts, you're going to put them where they're most needed.
Yeah, and I would imagine that the large fleets placing these orders are putting pressure on these OEMs to start the manufacturing again and to accept those orders, because the longer they have to keep their fleets on there, the more it screws up to all their systems and processes and financials, et cetera, because they're all built on every 3 years turning this over or every 4 years turning this over, and that's not there right now, right?
Right. Well, you've got a lot of orders that haven't been entered yet for 2023. The other thing you've got going on next year is what is in the industry called a pull ahead. We've got new emission regulations around nitrogen oxide coming in California and a couple other states in 2024. What that causes, that's about, I want to say, $30,000 worth of cost that's coming, that's going to be added, a second catalyst and things like that. So what's going to happen there is a lot of these fleets in the states that are affected are going to be pre-ordering trucks. They're going to order basically 2023 and early 2024 models. It gets confusing in terms of what year you call it. But basically, when the new rules go into effect on January 1st, 2024, these guys are going to have purchased their trucks already so that they've got existing trucks that fall under existing regulations are what they're buying. Originally, ACT put that number at about 20% of the truck buy, being pulled forward. Now they're down to about 10% because they said only a couple of states are going to follow California out of the gate. A few more will follow in 2025. This is actually good news for the manufacturers because it lets them pace themselves a little bit in terms of addressing this build. Overall, the pent-up demand, which is a number that you have to pay attention to for Class 8 trucks, is right now around 60 to 65,000 units, according to ACT. The beginning of the year, they had that pegged at 100,000. Now, why did it come down? It came down because their estimates for gross domestic product, or GDP, fell from about 4% growth to about 1.6%. So therefore, they put all that together. I'm not smart enough to figure out how they do it, but basically they're saying that, you still have the pent-up demand. This is a healthy market for new trucks. Don't kid yourself. I mean, we have plenty of demand out there, and it's just going to be a question of when can the industry respond, and when it can, it will. That's the whole point of yesterday's story.
If you order it, eventually it will get built. Alan, thank you for joining us this morning. Great to have you as always. We'll talk to you again soon. Right now, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.